Thank you, Kara. And thank you, Ashley and Kara Steiger, our guest today, and Rennie Berry. And good morning and welcome to all of those of you who are joining us online. Maybe you got just a little snippet of those last beautiful notes of that song. We hope that you did. And welcome to this beautiful day as we continue our journey, and a very important journey about love. Now, here's the interesting thing about this journey that we've been taking, is that we're not talking about, it's Valentine's month. We're not talking about Valentine's. We're not talking about feelings. We're not talking about emotions. We are talking about love. And we're holding it up sort of as this jewel that is the core and essence of who and what we are. And we're kind of trying to get at how we know about love. Not from the love that people teach us, not from the love we express to others, but this elemental core of who and what we are. I thought to myself the other day, how do we know that we're human? Really, somebody told you you were human, or you feel human, or you've taken enough Botox and you are human. But, in all honesty, you just are. You're human. And my point is this: you are love. You just are. At the core and essence of your fiber and being, you are the energy, the consciousness of love. So we've looked at this love in kind of different angles, and how we've learned about love through examples of last Sunday. We were talking about the earth and what the earth has to teach us, and what beauty has to teach us, and what music has to teach us about this elemental essence within us. But what also is true of love is that it is a power. It is a power within us. And we learn to utilize this power. We begin to connect with this power. And it's kind of like if you use the example of health. Health is an essential part of your life. That is, or we could call it the life force. We could call it anything. And when you are healthy, don't you feel powerful? It feels good to feel healthy. It feels good to feel good. And we can kind of handle anything. And, I have to laugh at myself. I had a cold these last 2 weeks. I was like, I can't even bake cookies. I just, I can't handle it because I don't feel good. And so health is an elemental part of us. Love is an elemental part of us. So it is a power. How are we going to use this power? That's kind of an interesting question. How do we use this power? We can use it to our detriment, or we can use it to our transformation. Love is simply neutral. That's the point I want to make here. Love is simply neutral, and how we use it and utilize it, how we take that power and how we use it into our lives and out into the world, is really our choice. Sometimes it's easier to go away because we have so many sort of side definitions and stories about love. Let's take a different kind of energy. And I always think that this really challenges me, and that's atomic energy. Atomic energy is neither good nor bad. It was a massive discovery of some of the elemental core of what composes and comprises the cells, the nucleus, the nuclear, the atom of cells. And it was such a magnificent discovery, all on its own. But what happened to atomic power? We took that power. Why did we even discover it to begin with? What was the driving impetus if it wasn't war? We wanted to use this nuclear energy, this power, to destroy. And at that time, when we saw nuclear power as destructive, it was really hard for us to understand that nuclear power could also be used for great innovation, for great medicine, for greater humanity. We had to kind of go through the negative aspect of using that power, so we could turn around and finally say, you know what? It could light cities. And it could end our dependency on certain fossil fuels. It could help people in hospitals and heal diseases. Suddenly, what was bad power now becomes good power. But the point is this, it never was either. It was power right in the middle. What about love? Love, too, as a power, is right in the middle. I think sometimes that another definition we might use of love is the law of giving and receiving. What is love? I give out and I receive back. Isn't that the law? That's the basic tenet of all spiritual principle. It's giving and receiving. And you see, when I pervert power, what I do is I tend to bring all that love into me, all that energy. We're talking about energy, remember? And it takes on different shapes and on different forms. It looks like adoration. It looks like public acclaim. It looks like all of these wonderful things. And I hold it into myself and I don't share and I don't give back. Conversely, we pervert the power of love by giving it all away. I gave it the office, I gave it the home, I gave it to my children. We've perverted the flow. We continue to pervert the flow. Now, folks, let's face it. At any one point in time, we're always on a spectrum, are we not? Some days I'm much more giving, and some days I'm much more receiving. Some days I know that the flow is blocked within me because I'm hurt or I'm upset. Some days I want to hurt someone else. That's just part of our human experience of love and how we use that power. But we know that it is power. Because when we say kind words to people, it heals. When we say hurtful words to people, they hurt. And they hurt for a long, long time. And so our objective really is to allow that flow to move smoothly and freely between. You see, it's like, remember the old teeter-totter, and the idea was you sat on either ends of the teeter-totter and you tried to get it to balance, right? That's love right there, is balanced. And people say to me, well, Marianne, where does evil come from? Evil comes from the perversion of that love, the stalemate, the stagnation of love. When we do not cycle love in its natural rhythmic cycles of giving and receiving, when something blocks the flow, you think of a reservoir, you think of a lake, you think of a river. When that flow is blocked, what happens? It becomes a terrible, terrible, stagnant pool. That's what happens with energy. And it's our job and our responsibility to recognize that this love that we're talking about is something that is innately a part of us. It's the very essence of who we are. We have it at all times, and therefore we have a responsibility to live and be in that flow. Why is that so important to know? Why is it so important to know that there is a power inherent in love and that we have the ability and the responsibility to utilize that power? I don't know about you, but I'm troubled. I watch the news, I watch the things that are happening, and I go, what's my response? What's my response? As an American, as a human being, as Marianne Harris? It's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to understand because at any one moment we can be angry or sad. It's bombarding us, and it's churning up our emotions. And what I thought to myself the other day when once again I was feeling all that, I thought, wait a minute. We have got to come back to the essential core, the elemental core. And that is the energy and power, not the feeling, not the emotion of love. We have to ask ourselves, I think, when we see things happening, does it bring us together? See, that's the question to me. Regardless of the politics or the people or the whatever, does it bring us together or does it separate us? Because we've said all along, love is the one essential ingredient shared by all. Well, then how can you say, I love you, but you go away? How can I say I love you and then I say, well, you get extra benefit? How can I say I love you when I don't stand in the middle and allow the flow of giving and receiving to everyone and anyone that comes into contact with me, as well as my thoughts? And so I've pondered this. Now, friends on Facebook have told me I'm a little bit on the airy-fairy side. They said, oh, Marianne, you're one of those kind. I'm not sure what those kind are. But I just wonder, who is responsible for bringing world peace? You see, who's responsible? That's the thing that challenges me. They say, well, it's the president's job, it's the Congress job, it's it's some other country's job. It isn't. It's your job and it's my job. And when we don't want to stand in the middle of love and be a loving presence, how are we going to change the world? We say, oh, look at all that anger and look at all that pain and look at all that. Look at all that. But then we say, look at it. Wow, awesome. Rather than saying, wait a minute now, I have a role to play. Now, you may be sitting there going, Marianne, like I am one drop in a really big bucket. That's true. But if you're dropping, all come together. We need a bigger bucket. I can't help but feel so much the burden on my heart that our job, what we teach, what we believe, is that a consciousness of one, that God is one, that we vibrate with the essence and the energy of the one true presence and power, which is life, love, intelligence, and power in its attributes, and vibrates out from the one to the all, no exceptions. Just like we said last Sunday with evolution. There are no exceptions. It is the core value of human knowledge to believe in evolution. And those few people who do not, and that cause a ruckus, bless their little hearts, they are missing the point. We are one. And we vibrate with the one always, always, always. It's not easy to stand in the one. And it's not always understood or accepted to stand in the one, to heal the hurt when we've been wounded, to understand the other point of view when we just don't get it. And I thought to myself a little story. I read about it when I was on sabbatical this past summer, and it came to my mind. There's a man by the name of George C. Marshall. How many recognize the name? General George C. Marshall. General George C. Marshall was the head of the Army in the 1940s. And Roosevelt came to him, President Franklin Roosevelt, and he said, George, we're going to have this invasion of Europe. And George knew he was a shoo-in for the job. He was the man. He had the position, he had the authority, he had the rank, he had the intelligence, he had the training to be the man chosen to do Operation Overlord. There's another man in the running by the name of Dwight Eisenhower. Now, Eisenhower, too, had training. Eisenhower, too, was a four-star general. Eisenhower, too, had statistics and all of that kind of field maneuvers, but not to the caliber and quality of George. Franklin Roosevelt took the two men and he said, George, I have to have you stay here. I need you to stay in Washington to be the Secretary of State. Can you imagine? In a sense, in a moment, he was just dismissed by the President of the United States, pushed aside. Now Eisenhower would take over. Eisenhower did a magnificent job, let me tell you. But here was George back in Washington, D.C., sharpening pencils, moving paper. His moment. Everything he had trained for, everything he had worked for, had passed him by. The war was over. Eisenhower, the great hero, lots of parades, everybody knew Dwight, old Ike, yeah, he did it. And here's George. But George had something that Eisenhower did not have. The same level of heart. Because George Marshall said, all right, the war is over. We've got to do something about the people, our enemies. And people are like, what do you mean we're going to do something about our enemies? And he said, you don't get it. Unless we help them, unless we give heart to them and money and goods and whatever it might take, then we really have defeated their spirit. And we cannot afford to do it again. Because you know what Marshall knew? In 1918, the Allies destroyed the Germans. 21 years later, they were fighting again. The same territory, the same people, the same countries, the same armies, and who now was leading? Adolf Hitler. And George Marshall said, we're not going to do that again. We're going to love our enemies. And we are going to send goods, and we're going to send supplies, and we're going to help Germany, and we're going to help Japan. 21 years later, were we in war with Germany and Japan again? No, we were not. The Marshall Plan, as it has come to be known, repaired Europe, brought it back to at least a sustainable place to live. Oh, friends, there were critics. There were critics in Germany and France as they received it. You didn't give me enough, he got more than I did. You know those kind of critics. And there were critics at home and said, why should we help our enemy? We defeated them. We bombed those places. And he said, you're not getting it. At one moment, they were our enemy. That is true. And we had to do everything we could to fight it. But now, we no longer have to fight that enemy. We have to heal. This, to me, the story of Marshall. You know, he died not too long after that. Obviously, Dwight Eisenhower went on to be president and all of that. Do you realize Dwight Eisenhower was one of the last people to see him alive? He'd gone to Walter Reed Hospital to say goodbye to his friend who he knew was right. And he honored him by saying he was one of the greatest humanitarians that ever lived. A man who could stand in the middle and who could say, I know what you're thinking, that we should destroy them and wipe them out and not help them because they hurt us. But we will not live into that energy anymore. We're drawing a line in the sand. And I really, you know, as I read Marshall's story and I watched our continuing political drama unfold, I think to myself, where is George Marshall if it's not you and me? Someone who can see beyond the immediate. George had a vision. Do you get that? There's no way when he sent that first box of care goods could he have ever imagined what would happen. The millions of dollars that we sent, the food, the supplies, the medical resources. And yet the vision still called him. We must love our enemies. Jesus himself said it's easy to love the people you love. It's easy to agree with the people you agree with. But it's not easy to find the common bond, to find the common heart, to find the love that binds us together. It is not a feeling. It is not an emotion. It is down farther, and sometimes we have to dig so hard to get down there. I know it and you know it. When we've been hurt, when we've been wounded, when things have gone bad, it's so difficult to say, well, you know, I can forgive. See, the tool that we have to forgive is to stand in the middle, to recognize that love is a presence and a power, an essential, elemental core of who you are. And if it's an essential, elemental core of who you are, then it's an essential and elemental core of who someone else is, whether it be a person, a country, or a world. Our job in these very troubling times, I know you struggle, I struggle. I'm like, ugh. And it's not that we don't have the right to disagree. That's what America was founded on, my friends. It's not that we don't have a different point of view. But when we are unwilling to love, we've stopped the flow. When we are unwilling to listen, then we've stopped the flow. And if there's anything that will heal us, it is the fact that we have to ask ourselves over and over and over again, will this policy, procedure, whatever government bring us back together? There are no enemies. We are one. One life, one country, one God that vibrates with the same pulse and pace. It is our highest and sometimes our most difficult work. And let us rise to the challenge in these challenging times to remind ourselves that our spiritual nature, our journey, our teachings is about seeing the oneness instead of the separation in one another. Thank you and God bless.